Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the program. Now, we were trying to get hold of Messiah Saluja out in Syria, but it seems that the line is not too good there. So we'll move on with the program this morning, and we'd like to welcome to the show Shabnam Mayet from Protect the Rohingya, another serious, unfortunate issue that's developing on the other side of the world, while a lot of focus is on COVID-19 as well as the developments in the United States of America. People, however, continue to suffer, and this time the Rohingya Muslims are once again at the receiving end. Assalamu alaikum, Shabnam, and welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam. Thank you very much.
A number of Rohingya have been trying to escape the conditions in Bangladesh and are trying to make their way to Malaysia. But these
Mhm.
boats have seen many return, and the conditions are horrific. What has been happening?
So basically, what happened is over the past 2 months, firstly, a boat was found out at sea and it had been there for 2 months. And the conditions on these boats, let's go back to the conditions, are terrible because people don't have enough place to move their feet. They get a meal maybe every 2 days. There's no drinking water. People are forced to drink seawater. And of course, the people smugglers and human traffickers are extremely violent and brutal. So people are dying on these boats. Women are being raped on these boats. And because of the COVID threat, which of course affects refugees crossing borders more than anyone else in the world, because of their vulnerable situation, Malaysia and Thailand were like, no, we're not going to take people in. So even though boats attempted to land over and over in that 2 month period, they never really got it right. And it's really silly because the countries could say, come aboard, come onto land, and we'll quarantine you for 14 days, like everyone else is, and then we'll let you into the population. But they didn't, and so eventually these boats made their way back towards Bangladesh. Bangladesh took one in. People upon another boat were taken to Bar Sanchar, which Bangladesh is trying to operationalize. And of course, as you know, human rights organizations last year said that it wasn't ready. It was on a cyclone and floodplain, and they're not sure that it has the enough essential services to really sustain life. So eventually, people came off the one boat, 500 of them, in a terrible situation. And they think that there are more than 1,000 Rohingya currently at sea on boats, and we're waiting to see what's going to happen there. But of course, with the COVID threat, as you said, everyone is really focusing on the disease, and maybe we want to talk a little bit more about that in Rakhine State and in the camps.
Yes, let's move on to that topic for a moment. COVID-19, and we know that the Rohingya in Myanmar and the Rakhine State have been under severe pressure for a very very long time,
Mhm.
and they've been treated as next to nothing compared to other citizens perhaps in the country. So how has COVID impacted on their lives? And I suspect that it's just made it worse.
Exactly. So there's 600,000 Rohingya in Rakhine State. And the situation, unfortunately, for them is the more than 100,000 of those are in like concentration camp like conditions since 2012, where we see sometimes, they're up to their knees in water. The camp situation is terrible. So social distancing is not possible. Clean water is not possible. They're subject to heavy militarization and checkpoints. And even though the government of Myanmar, since around the 11th of May, has called for unilateral ceasefire across the nation, Rakhine State and one township in Chin State have not been included in that ceasefire. So there's no real respite because there's currently a war going on between the Arakan Army, which is another separatist group, and the Myanmar government, the Myanmar military, and the Rohingya, of course, are being stuck between that. There are around 200 infections in Rakhine State. And when we look at the camps in Cox's Bazar, we're looking at around 15,000 people who have been quarantined. So the roads to three townships have been totally closed off. There are around 29 infections. And as of yesterday, one death of a 71-year-old man. Of course, there are not enough isolation wards, there are not enough hospital wards. And so the situation in the camp is terrifying for many people because you've seen the camps, right? So the way people live is literally right next door to each other, 10 people to a shelter. Once it starts spreading, there's really no way to stop the tide.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at the conditions in the camps themselves, what will be the driving factor? Why will people want to leave those situations and try and make a better life in places like Malaysia using boats where life is not even guaranteed on them?
Well, because in the camps right now, firstly, since the end of last year, Bangladesh okayed the building of a fence, right, around all 34 camps. Also, people are not allowed to leave for work. They have to stay in the camps and wait for their rations to be handed out. Around 500,000 children of school-going age are not allowed to go to school. Maybe a few thousand of those are. So the situation is pretty dire. And since September last year, Bangladesh has implemented phone restrictions and an internet ban. And so, how exactly must the Rohingya stay in touch, firstly, with the outside world? Secondly, knowledge on the disease is so limited because you have to work on mouth to mouth and getting the message out around the communities when they could just put back the internet and send that information out and people would have better access. So, of course, the situation in the camp is dire. There's human trafficking with the COVID disease. I mean, there's been more domestic violence, but we've seen an increase in that around the world. And so, of course, no one leaves if the situation is okay and if you're comfortable, right? Wherever
Mm.
that is in the world.
Yes, and I think it's heightened by the fact that they're willing to take such a perilous journey, hoping for a better life somewhere else. In terms of any long-term plans for the Rohingya, has there been any developments in that regard, or are we just going to, accept that this is their fate and they are going to continue suffering in this manner? What would we like to see happen to the Rohingya people?
I mean, it's safe, protected, and voluntary return back home, right? But as you know, last year we went to the ICJ. The Gambia went to the ICJ, and the ICJ then gave some provisional measures this year. Among those were that Myanmar had to take all necessary steps to prevent genocide, that they had to prevent the destruction of evidence, and that there would have to be a reporting mechanism. So they would have to firstly report every four months on what they're doing, and then after that, every 6 months. The 4 month period ended on the 22nd of May, and we are told that Myanmar did, in fact, report back. However, that would then go directly to the Gambia, and only the judges of the ICJ would then make that public. So, we're waiting to see what that says. And then, of course, the Argentina case, that was overruled. But now the court is re-looking rather their decision, and they've decided that they will prosecute. They're just going to look at if there's any duplicity in those cases that have currently been brought in the Argentinian courts under universal jurisdiction. So we look forward to seeing what's happening there. Things are moving forward slowly, but again, enough has not been done for Rohingya on the ground, and that's where we need to focus, both in Rakhine State and in Bangladesh. We know that Bangladesh has done a lot for the Rohingya, but unfortunately, these are 1 million people and their lives continue despite the genocide being perpetrated against them, and Bangladesh has to do more for them. We currently have a petition running, which is asking the Bangladeshi government to put back the internet, so education can happen, more education around COVID. Young people can use it for schooling purposes because they have hardly any formal schooling. And of course, the Rohingya can be in touch with the outside world. So you can find that on our Twitter and on our Facebook. And I really ask listeners to please go out and sign that and share it with your family and your friends.
Absolutely. Now, Shabnam, on a broader scale, and the battle for the resources in Myanmar by various countries, corporations, and entities vying for the gas, the mineral resources. Are there any developments there? Are we seeing the Myanmar government going, with a preferred, set of nations or countries or companies as opposed to others? What's happening to the core issue around, why they want to get rid of the Rohingya from that part of the world?
Well, I mean, for a long time, Myanmar's been going with trade with China, but it's also a new market, right, for many since 2011. And so companies are going in order to do trade there because, it's new territory. But there is a dirty list out by one of the Rohingya campaigns. And if you just Google Dirty List Myanmar, what it does is the campaign cleverly puts down, the same way the BDS does, companies who are doing work with the Myanmar military. And we know that the Independent Fact Finding Mission, or doing trade rather, has listed a lot of these companies. And at the end of the day, one of the ways to actually, bring around change is to affect multinational corporations where it counts, and that's in their pockets. And of course, should organizations and multinational corporations stop doing trade with the Myanmar military companies, then they're going to be forced to change their policy. And so there was a campaign against certain breweries, against the Western Union, various other companies, and the list is available.
Shabnam Mayet from the Protect the Rohingya, Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much for your time this morning and for bringing us up to speed once again with regards to the Rohingya people and for being at the forefront of their issues. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.